Today, we're delighted to be joined by Dominique Webb, a creative producer working across film and television development and production. Dominique has worked with organisations including the BBC, Sky Studios, the BFI, Film Cymru and Arts Council England, with films screening at BAFTA and Oscar qualifying festivals and winning numerous awards. She is the co-founder of If It Is, a female-led independent production company developing distinctive, high-end, thought-provoking stories, designed not just to entertain, but to shape conversations. Dominique is also a BAFTA member, a BFI and BAFTA Talent Programme alum, and an industry mentor, and a masterclass tutor, all helping support the next generation of filmmakers. In this episode, we explore what it really means to be a producer, how stories are built from the ground up, and why regions like Lincolnshire matter creatively, culturally, and economically. Please welcome Dominique Webb to Location Links Loud. So for anyone who might not fully understand what a producer does and what the role is, can you give us a little bit of insight on what drew you to producing?
So a producer is the person who brings a project together. They manage the whole process from the beginning to the end. It depends which aspect of the industry you're working in, a lot as to how much control you have and at what stage you become involved. But I think, in indie film, independent film, you are the person that is there from the very beginning. The project might even be your idea. And you work with a writer to build that project, to shape that project and to know where to take it to get it financed, to get it positioned in the marketplace. And you're the person that is going to be there till the very end of the project, overseeing all aspects of development and production.
And what drew you personally to producing in itself? Was it a choice or was it a road?
It was definitely something that I didn't set out to do. I didn't know anyone in the film industry when I was young. I definitely discovered it in my journey. I was very much drawn to the creative industries. When I first started in the industry, I thought I was going to be a director, like I think a lot of people do. It's definitely the side of it that I was very much drawn to. But as I, developed and learned and had experiences in production, I realized that producing offered so much more to me and was equally as creative as directing, but had a lot more to offer, a fuller, kind of wider experience of the production and of the process, and a lot more depth. It was much more multifaceted than directing, I think.
And was there a specific moment when you realised producing was where your creative choice was going to go, and what impact did that have on you?
I think it was an evolution of discovery, really. I realised that there was so much creativity in managing a project, and it was so influential, the role of the producer, and I wanted to be involved in that decision-making process, and that shaping a project with all of the agents and the different people involved, the writer, director, the commissioners, and shaping it for its place in the market was a highly creative role, whilst being rooted in the business. And that influence of the role of the producer, I think, was something that I was very much drawn to. And I learned, it's not something that you can necessarily discover overnight in the way that you learn your craft as a director or a cinematographer, for example. I think it's something that you really have to, it's an evolution into that role.
I'm gonna go off script a little bit, because did you have any formal training into what a script should be, or was it instinctive? For me, I've learnt about the inciting incidents and things like that much later on, when you realise that when you felt it didn't feel right when you were reading a script, that there's something just a bit slow here, or whether you'd realise there was structure to scripts. coming as a director, was there some, and applying that to your producing, is there the formal training, was that something that was brought in, or do you think you've again learned that across the years? That's the longest question ever.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm totally with you. I think, don't get me wrong, in terms of my training as a director wasn't rigorous. It was interesting and it was there, but it wasn't a rigorous 2-year masters at the NFTS, for example, in directing. So it was, I didn't have that story development. I don't come from that background, and I know some producers do come through that route. So I have studied it a little bit, but I'm very much coming from a multi-faceted place, I think, a bit like yourself as a producer. So starting off in production and then moving more over to the development side and learning, that instinctively what's missing as a producer, but you can't help but learn the methods and the elements that we use to assess a script, as you know, through a development process.
And I suppose you've developed for TV as well, not just for film. Is there a marked difference in those early stages of making a decision about a script? Like, have you flipped something from TV to film, film to TV?
I've tried to, yeah. I think there's so many factors in terms of whether the form is TV or film in a project, and lots of different ways in which we have to explore that project. It depends what stage it's at when it comes to us as a producer. I think if it's early stages, you're working with a writer and you've got, you know, a subject matter that you want to tackle, or, you know, a story that's real that you want to explore on screen and adapt to screen, or a book that you want to adapt to screen, there's a number of factors that you need to look at together as a team to figure out, you know, what the best form for that story is. And it's not just TV anymore, it's terrestrial TV, and then there's a streamer version of something, which obviously, if it's a very complex story, there's a lot going on there. You know, you have to be sure, if you're going to develop something for TV, that certainly for a streamer, that there is going to be 3 series worth of story. You know, if it's a more contained story, it may be that a feature film is a better form for that story. Depends on the impact, depends on the audience, it depends on the marketplace, it depends on who's interested in that subject matter at that time. You know, projects are very dependent on timing, and if it's the right time for that story to be told and in what form. I think, you know, during COVID, cinema collapsed altogether. You know, nobody was going to the cinema. And so a lot of producers, excuse me, pivoted to television, and a lot of independent film producers pivoted to television. They found out more about TV. That might be at the lower budget range of TV drama. But it enabled them to think in a more ambitious way to some extent, and think about how could that story be adapted to be told over 4 parts or 6 parts, and could there be a second series, which is obviously really important for TV. So it's really interesting and exciting, and you know, you have to give that time and space and breathing room to develop with the writer that project for the right form and the right platform.
And it sounds like you're collaborative with the creative IP, and then we both know how important IP is. So when somebody comes to you with a project, are there any so you've talked about the key points: audience, and I suppose marketability is what is its root. Should we focus on film for a second? If someone came to you with something that you know is super expensive, you know, it's a studio movie, you would assess that it's just not my thing, potentially? You know, talk to me about the difference between the studio and the independent kind of script that lands on your desk.
Yeah, absolutely. As a producer, there's so many factors that you have to think about when you read a script, and one of them absolutely is budget. And if something is a big budget, when you read it and you think, oh my gosh, that's good. And actually, I've got a project that came to me. It was an absolute rough diamond, but it was written with enormous scenes that would have cost, so many millions of pounds. And it was an unknown writer in the industry. So we know that that's a challenge in itself. And usually if you are an emerging writer, emerging director, the best chance that you've got of getting a project greenlit is if it's a contained budget. So there's a lot of work that you have to do to understand, and to make that decision about whether you want to put that work into to take that project forward if there's a huge budget. I mean, I've got a couple of examples. One of them is with a well-known writer and a big budget. Now with that one, because the writer has had quite a lot of success, has won like major awards, it's a different way of looking at it, because that commissioners, that financiers are ready to put money behind that writer. However, they might not give it to you as an independent producer, all of that money, because they want a bigger framework around that. And that's just the landscape that we operate in, and that's fine. So with that project, for example, we took it to a bigger company who were very interested in that project. And again, we chose that company specifically because of the subject matter of this particular film script. And that company has now become the majority producer, and we are the minority producer. But when it's a lower budget, you decide to take that film on, you can maintain being the majority producer or the sole producer. So I think, if it's got a studio budget, there's very little that you can do as an indie producer in terms of maintaining control. And again, one of the things that we have to do as indie producers, especially if you're working with emerging writers and directors, I think, is to help them understand the landscape and how the bigger the budget, if it's a studio that comes in, you do have to relinquish that control. So there's pros and cons in terms of working at the lower budget, and some of the best creativity comes out of low budget filmmaking. Some of the most, special moments, some of the feelings that you feel in greater depth come from lower budget filmmaking. And that magic's felt when you have the space and the time and the creative control to explore that on set. And
do you think, just on the example of working with the bigger company, when it comes to another project following this, people, you have great success with that project, they will see that you have delivered, albeit with a bigger company, that there'll be more trust. And I think that what you're saying is trust from your writers' understanding to your commissioners and your buyers, knowing that you can deliver.
Absolutely, yeah. Your track record is everything, really. And I think the more that you do, and those projects, for example, that you do with a bigger indie, definitely help to position yourself for the bigger budget next time.
I'm going to go back to the beginning, because I feel like we've not covered it. It's like, how did you start? What was where did you come from, and how have you ended up sat chatting to me here, basically? Like, what was the childhood Dominique thinking of, I want to be a film producer?
Yeah, it feels like a long time ago. Do you know what? I didn't know anything about the industry as a child. I grew up near Lincoln. There was no industry here. It wasn't something that I saw. I couldn't see it to be it, if you see what I mean. It wasn't, which is important now. And I think, what I was passionate about was music, football, and and injustice, really. And I was very passionate about the arts. I loved film, but it wasn't, as I say, it wasn't something that I knew how to get into. I think a lot of the courses that exist now didn't exist then. And so when I went to university, it was something that I discovered there. It was the onset of cable TV was happening. And that was seen as quite an exciting time, a time of possibilities. It was also the 90s, so it had that kind of feeling anyway, I think, of possibility, excitement with media across different forms and music. And I discovered it, and I just felt like it was where I should be.
And at that time, I suppose the place you should be would be London.
Well, I did study in the Northwest, which is obviously where it was
see where
all
I'm going with
happening.
this.
It was all happening in the Northwest music-wise. So that was brilliant. But when I finished, I moved to London, and it was also happening there. So it was very exciting. The industry was, booming. Everything was in Soho. So it was before everything had kind of become a bit more, disjointed a bit more everywhere. So Soho was so exciting at the time. And I had trained a little bit after my degree in production, film, docs. And then when I moved to London, I moved more into the commercial industry. So I was producing music videos, commercials, started, at the bottom, worked my way up. And the budgets were great. It was exciting. So creatively, lots was going on in that industry. It was, an exciting time to be involved in it. And then, but I definitely felt after a while, I definitely felt a calling back to longer form content with a bit more depth. And so I started making, shorts and docs and really getting into story again. And then when I moved back to the area at that point, my kids were babies, and I kind of rediscovered the region after needing to go to the bright lights and and be in more kind of busy cities. And I think it was a really interesting time. I started making shorts that did quite well, connecting with filmmakers who were in the region, so storytellers like Laura Turner, really talented director Philip Stevens. And together we made some exciting stories, and that's...
Should we talk about Lapwing then? Because Laura wrote Lapwing, set on the east coast of Lincolnshire, a really beautifully shot film. Emmett Scanlon, is that right?
Yeah.
It was with it. Period piece, which you get told not to do on a low budget, but I'd love to hear about that whole process. And just watching that film, it is a real vista of possibility of what we're trying to achieve here at the moment is people understanding what's on offer in Lincolnshire. And that beautiful coastline is seen in that film. So I would like to touch on Lapwing and that whole process and how that came about.
Well, Phil and I had been shooting a number of shorts in Lincolnshire and in rural Lincolnshire that had done quite well. And we made a film called The Forecast, which was sat out there. And then we made a few other films, and then we worked with Laura on a short, and we made we entered some competitions. We got involved with the BFI, and we managed to get some finance from them for a few short films. We made The Knock, which was a really beautiful film. It wasn't on the coast, but we shot the whole thing in Lincolnshire. That did very well. And then we made Going Country, which again was shot in the region. And that was written by Laura and directed by Phil and produced by me. And that film did really well too. And Lapwing was the natural next step for that. I was busy at the time doing some other things, so I didn't actually produce that one fully. I exec'd that one. I produced some days on set, but I was still really involved in some of the development and decision making, and it was amazing on set. Yeah, it's quite a brutal. It can be quite a brutal landscape. The sea it's incredible, but it's powerful, the sea and the landscape, and the wind seems to just whistle around. So from a sound perspective, it's quite challenging in that location. But it was a micro budget feature, and Phil showed incredible tenacity to get that film made. He produced it as well as directed it, and galvanized everybody that we knew from the region who was working in film, and shot it in an incredible amount of days, about 15 days, like non-stop, grueling long days on set, a couple of night shoots, and it was
I heard you were dealing with tidal issues as well with the kit,
yes.
because you're literally on the beach and the North Sea is coming in, and it's not even like you've got to wrap in time because of timings. It's like literally we're going to be underwater unless we finish quickly.
Yeah, I mean, that day, there was one day in particular, I did happen to be there, where we had the weather reports from the local experts, and it didn't happen like that at all. The tide definitely quickly came in, along with, it was a big scramble. There was a vehicle and kit, and so it was quite stressful that day. But all was well in the end.
And you've had direct experience as well from BBC Sherwood, which shot, I think, in Mablethorpe and various places around, again, the East Coast, which is great, showing the East Coast vista. What made the county such a strong fit for that story?
I mean, for that particular story, it was based on true events. And I think with how they wanted to, obviously it was important to them to be as authentic as possible. And so in the true story, that part of the story had happened in that region. So it was important for them to go out and shoot at that location in the region. And it's such an incredible location, because it's a huge expanse of land that's very underdeveloped. And so it gives this rawness to the elements, and the ruralness of the Lincolnshire coast. It's the second largest county in the country, yet it's so rarely seen on screen. And that coastline is vast, yet hugely underpopulated and hugely underdeveloped. So it's always stark when you see it on screen.
Except at the peak of August, when everybody else from the holidaymakers kind of influx to the East Coast. Yeah. It's a real different feeling along kind of Skegness, Mablethorpe, Cleethorpes, all along that way when the holidaymakers are at their peak. But it's also, I love, and I like anyone visiting Lincolnshire needs to come in the winter. I don't understand why it's so seasonal, because I love wrapping up and going for a walk on the beach.
Yeah.
And there's some of the beaches that you can drive up the cars right onto the sand. It feels very American, to be honest, sometimes, so if we're trying to recreate an American beach, it's not quite the Californian Sea, the North Sea,
no.
but
we shot the forecast at one of those exactly because we needed the car to be looking at the beach. And so, there's all kinds of different locations along there. And actually Lapwing was shot during the summer, but you just step a little way away from those major holiday beaches, and it was so peaceful. You would not believe it was the height of summer. And you could not have done that in different parts of the country. No, you just couldn't have done it, because the beach.
It's a secret that we want people to enjoy, but not too many people.
Yeah.
From a producer's point of view, how did Lincolnshire's location help Sherwood in the real vision and emotional truth? I think you've covered that. Yeah. Were there any locations in the county that surprised you creatively once you were filming there?
Locations that surprised me. Trying to think. Surprised me. I think the sea always, the coast always surprises me, just how, it's like a character in itself, and it just brings something so special. The space, the skies of Lincolnshire are so beautiful and so big, and I think that it reminds me of the American South. You see the great American filmmakers or British filmmakers that shot in the American South and had those big skies. and I always want to do something here that is reminiscent of that. I always feel driving down some of those rural roads across the flat Lincolnshire, coming away from the coast, it feels those huge skies and huge stories that just have that sense of space.
Yeah, I agree with you. The photographic golden hour is like nothing else here. You don't realise.
I always have a soundtrack in my head, going with it, and thinking that piece of music as well would just be incredible now.
Yeah. And I mean, we could get into the driving around the county in different parts, but this every time I spend time going from Skegness up to Grimsby and going through the Wolds as well, you just like it's different every time.
Yeah, and I guess surprising me, your question, I think, it's coming to me that some of those country lanes as well that you go down, they haven't changed. There's been no impact of modernity on some of those country lanes, and I think that's always so beautiful. And the fields that surround you, they haven't. It could be 500 years ago, and the amount of the diversity in the locations that you could use for filming is just incredible, especially for period pieces, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that's not just the country lanes, is it?
No, the towns as well. Market towns.
Just a bit of dirt on the floor, cover those double yellow lines, and we're off.
Absolutely.
It's a really opportunistic. There's a lot of opportunity to find those period places within the county. From a practical point of view, we both come through the kind of let's save money heads as well. Let's get this made the best it can be, but with a little amount of money. Access and logistics and crew in the county. How did it perform as a filming location in comparison to the rest of the country?
I would say, coming from a low budget filmmaking background's always a benefit for filming in regions that aren't so well represented, because you have to, as a low budget producer, you have to do a lot more than you would do if you're working on a bigger bigger budget film, or a studio film, for example, or even a big TV show. So I think finding solutions is obviously something that you've got to have as an indie producer, finding solutions to problems. And I think that we do that very well when we're in regions like this. So the resources aren't necessarily there, the frameworks aren't necessarily there. There wasn't a film office when we shot any of the stuff that we've shot in Lincolnshire. So it was Phil and I in a car going out, finding locations, looking at them, think, will that work? And going up to find, you're driving around, doing that side of things for yourself, thinking about what you need, and, not having that department. So and then in terms of finding production officers, you'd just be in, a church hall, for example, and you do all of that yourself.
Yeah.
So you can do it. It doesn't have to be elsewhere in another county that's got a stronger,
with all your trucks coming into your actors.
That's right.
So I suppose it's a smaller unit.
It's a smaller unit, definitely. And I think that it can be done, and once it's, set up, it's great, and
well, this gives me an opportunity to talk about what we've been trying to do over the last couple of years. So similarly, I tried to find out whether the council could give me permission to film somewhere, and discovered there was no film office and nobody was really taking any responsibility. So after the last 18 months, the county council now has film office services. So this, if anyone listening to this wanted to come into the county, can make that phone call now and go, I need X, Y, and Z. This is what I'm looking for my project, small, medium, or large. Because yes, there's the indie film. We know how to make small. You can make it work, but also the facilities throughout the country can also facilitate the bigger budget studio projects. So most studio units will move within their unit anyway, but we do have crew support in local neighbouring counties as well as within the region.
Yeah, absolutely.
And local crew is growing and growing. With the point of this is that we're talking and we're finding out who else is available and willing to be here. And also, we're only 45 minutes from London. This is what I'm going to say a lot throughout this, is that, we're not actually a million miles away. We're much closer than Manchester. So if you're willing to go to Manchester, you can be here in half the time, is my one of my things that I'm saying to people.
Trains every half an hour.
Exactly. It does work. And actually, it's only going to get better as the network and the connections continue to grow. How important is it that strong regional support and local knowledge is within the team when shooting in the county? So, you said you did your own scouting over the last couple of years with launching all of this project. I now know pretty much, I would say, South Lincolnshire up to the Wolds, up to Grimsby, and I've got this kind of patchy area in the Scunthorpe and Northwest. That's when you kind of get your local knowledge, isn't it? Like if you're not spending time in the county, you need somebody
Absolutely.
who knows the county.
Absolutely. And having those companies and organisations in place will only attract, bigger productions to the region. If a bigger company has a story about the region, that they feel authentically they should be going to that region to tell the story, to show it on screen, then it, like you say, if the framework isn't in place, they're gonna be thinking, I'm too busy for this, I haven't got time to go myself, I'm based in London, it's too much bother. There's a regional fund in Yorkshire, there's a regional fund in the West Midlands, there's a regional fund in the North East, there's a regional fund in the North West.
Where's our regional fund?
There's no regional fund here, so there's no framework, there's no funding. Even though it's incredibly cost effective to shoot here, they don't know that, and they don't have the time to discover all of that themselves. So to have all of that in place, the framework initially, but then to get the funding would be a complete game changer for the region.
And that's, it's something we are shouting about, and we're trying to get local industry behind. We know the council are in the early stages of looking at this. It will only encourage economic growth as well. Totally. So from a film coming to a village, I use Barkham Street in Wainfleet as an example. I'm sure that the town won't mind me mentioning. It has this amazing street that looks like London from the night, from 1500 onwards, that can be locked off to a producer with a green screen either side, and it would become a destination for tourists to have a look at. So if you end up, imagine if Tom Cruise took that film, if you're watching, having that talent becomes a draw. It's 5 minutes from Skegness. The coastal tourists could come and spend time there.
Absolutely.
But there's this set jetting, which is a real thing. People want to go where Harry Potter was shot. They want to go where Mission Impossible was shot and see that stuff. So the more projects that do come to the region are only going to encourage economic spend outside of the initial spend of the production as well. What would you say to a producer that's considering, they've made that phone call to the council, they're considering coming to Lincolnshire? What would you say to them about why they should come here?
I would say it's got so much to offer that will surprise you. There's such diversity in Lincolnshire. It's a huge county. Nobody says, oh, Yorkshire's got one thing, there's such diversity in the county, from huge coastlines to cities to market towns to villages to rural to the most beautiful cathedral and castle. The diversity is huge, and I would say the flexibility as well and the cost effectiveness is something that I think it will be hard to beat. And there's so much, there's so logistically, it's challenging, but at the same time it's easier because it's quite an underpopulated place. So the chances of finding solutions and making things happen, are pretty high. I think whatever we've wanted to do, we've managed to do it, and we've managed to get people on side to be able to do it in the region. And I think that doesn't always happen in bigger, more established places. I think sometimes there's more red tape, it's more challenging. I think it can be quite efficient here to get things done.
I think people are welcoming
Yeah.
to the film industry. They want to see this happening.
Yeah.
So you now run If It Is with your business partner, Giselle Phillips. What was the vision behind founding that company?
Okay, so Giselle and I met about a couple of years ago, and we started working together on a number of projects. She's another independent film producer, but with quite a different background to mine in a producing capacity. And so we started working together on a couple of projects, and that was going really well. And we decided about 18 months ago to come in together and really build a slate together that was, an exciting diverse range of projects that we wanted to put into a company together. So we evolved Inceptive Films was my company. We evolved it into, we went through a process of kind of how we were going to frame it. And we looked at Inceptive Films, Inceptive Television, Inceptive Studios as we kind of grew and we built the company. And we decided that's the origins of If It Is: Inceptive Films, Inceptive TV, Inceptive Studios.
Got it.
And then we worked with the most amazing designers on the brand and the website, and we ended up going through these iterations of it. And in the end, we went, it doesn't matter. The story, the evolution behind If It is from the Inceptive brand. But we ended up dropping all of the longer names and just having this statement. We wanted to do something differently. I think the industry is always about, rebirth, about standing out, about taking up the space in the marketplace and in the industry. And I think we wanted to do something slightly differently that was a little bit disruptive. And we decided to just have this strong sort of if it is these words, and we liked that. And so we came in together. We got a little bit of funding to build the slate and to take us to where we are today. So we have a brilliant investor behind us, and that's where we are. So it's been a really exciting journey over the past 18 months, building the slate, really getting our strategy together in terms of where we want to go, where we want to be. We want to make quality projects that have something to say. We want to work with great talent. It's a challenging time for the industry, as you know, film and TV now. They're both in a challenging time, but I think we have to, as producers, one thing that as well as an independent producer, is that you have to be tenacious. You have to find solutions. That's what we do as producers, and I think we have to see it as an opportunity. The industry is in this position, but we have to find ways around that. We can't keep doing things the way that we've been doing them for the past however many years, because the industry's changed. So we have to change, and we have to find ways of doing things differently. And so I think it was an interesting time to explore that with If It Is, and Giselle and I are kind of continuing to explore that and find ways of making things happen.
How important was it for you to build a female-led company? It's a clear statement from you and Giselle that is having an ethical identity, I suppose.
Well, ethics always, and authenticity and ethics, very important to me, and always has been. But I think the female aspect of it is, I think it's still quite unusual, amazingly, to just have, female leaders and female owners of companies. Certainly I've worked with Creative UK. They've been incredibly supportive. I was on their investment program, as well as their female founders program, and they've set those up for good reason. There aren't a lot of female founders, And the statistics are incredibly that only 2% of investment goes to the women. So 98% of investment into companies goes to male-owned companies, which is staggering. And I think it actually dropped last year to under 2%, something like 1.6 or 1.4% went to female founders. So that in itself is just staggering. And I think it's important that we do as much as we can to counter that. And so for us to take investment was a good line in the sand. And, you know, we are looking at that whole process, which would be a completely different podcast, as we move forward. And yes, I think identity is important, brand is important in the industry in a way that it more so than it ever has before, as we move to content being more important on different platforms and younger generations coming through and demanding those changes and looking at how brands are actually impacting longer form and theatrical storytelling. So to be able to position the company in a way that's got a strong identity, but also that's future facing was really important. So we don't just work with female writers and directors, though. You know, we're not anti-men in any way, shape or form. But I think in terms of decision making in the industry, it's important that women are, you know, very much at the table.
And that was something you mentioned there, is that leading into how you decide what content you're taking on? And in some ways I hate the word content, because it's like taking projects on. I suppose it's like every script that comes to me or every idea that comes to me, it goes back to audience, and it goes back to route to audience and how it's going to get there and what is it. As two female leaders working together, it must be so nice having someone with you on the journey.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it can be incredibly lonely, this journey, but I think it's really great. And we come at the projects from different perspectives, which is so useful, because you don't just want to be one voice, you know. So we have different perspectives, different things that we look at. And yeah, we're definitely, we work with male writers, male directors, it's, you know, and different partners. And yeah, I mean, it's just, we look for interesting stories. We're not tied by one kind of genre. We don't just do one kind of story. We're definitely genre agnostic. We look for quality projects that have generally got something to say, and we look for an authored voice or that are bold. We love brave storytellers. And yeah, if it's got that something, then we want to take it on, and we want to help it and take it to the right audience.
So we're going to move on to your, I suppose, support of young filmmakers coming through. You're deeply involved in mentoring and talent development. Why is that side of the industry so important to you?
I think, you know, coming from that independent film background where, you know, you meet, as you're coming up, you meet writers and directors that are coming up in that kind of emerging space, the film festival lab space, the programs, industry program space. And so I know how hard it is, you know, to get to that point as a writer, director and a producer in the indie space. So I think it's important also as a woman, where maybe women haven't had so many opportunities. Certainly when I was coming through, it was a very sexist industry in that, you know, if you did want, you know, there's kind of creative, sort of more sexy roles as they were seen, were very much given to men. You know, you were very much guided over to, you know, we'll trust you with a spreadsheet kind of thing. But yeah, and I think it's important. There's a lot more opportunities now for young females, but it's still quite, you know, decision making and directing. It's still, you know, pretty male heavy. And, you know, also writing to a certain extent. So for me, it's important that, you know, producing as well is something it's not something that you learn overnight. It's a process that takes a long time to have the confidence, I think, to be able to operate, dealing with, you know, powerful agents, powerful commissioners, you know, to be able to negotiate with those people is not something that you can do straight away in the way that you're allowed to, as a director, learn your trade by directing and keep making mistakes, etc., etc. It doesn't work like that with producing. So I think it's important that we're there to help, to guide, to, you know, offer any advice that we can along the way, because, you know, especially working class creators, producers, how, you know, the structures are not there. It's a tough industry. How do you make a living whilst evolving in your practice if you don't have the finances behind
And that's
you to
not
do
just
that?
at entry level.
It's not just the entry
I think,
level.
you know, there is
Absolutely not.
There is a, just because you come from a working class background doesn't mean you don't have a creative idea.
Absolutely.
And I think that's a real, I've noticed this week, this is side, but I've noticed this week there's a report come out from the Edinburgh Film and Television. They're really encouraging working class support. They're giving a load of free spaces to go up to, and it doesn't matter what level your career, you just have to apply for it. So it's not just about entry level. I think stories exist everywhere. And
absolutely,
it seems, you know, there seems to be a lot of change. I think everything's a lot better than it was. I think we can hold our hands up to that, but there's still room in diversity, in working class access, in regional storytelling, which is what we're here for.
Yeah.
How can I put this? Do you feel a responsibility as a producer at the point that you're at in your career to develop and shape more inclusively and sustainably in industry?
I think so, because it's something that I've always been passionate about doing. It's something that's embedded in the productions that we do. And it's something that, I think because, you know, regionally, especially, you know, we had to move to London because there was no industry here, you know, and I think that that's a real shame. And you know, and it's actually a travesty for young people now because it's so expensive to move to London. I mean, it was then, but it feels worse now. It feels harder now if kids don't have financial, you know, grounding backing to support that. So to be able to create, to have a little part in, you know, creating an industry that's got more roots here, that can exist here, that can bring some finance to the region, to encourage people to shoot here, to support, so that people, you know, crew members, writers, directors can actually live here and make a living, would be a brilliant legacy for the company and, you know, for the wider greater good of, you know, of the industry. You know, representation is everything, and if this region isn't on screen very often, then with such a huge region,
I mean, I think both of us have probably lost our accents by the amount of time we spent in the south. But you know, I'm from the south of the county, which is a strong Bostonian accent, really was, and comes out when I'm with family. But if you're not represented on screen as well, there's no connection for the people of the county. And I think, you know, it's brilliant that things are being shot, but there isn't really the authenticity of voice. If you actually, I mean, we've got crew members here today that have Lincolnshire accents. If people can't place them out of the county, are you from Yorkshire?
Yes.
Are you from Norfolk?
Yes.
It's like neither, actually. You know, there's a whole place in between. So more, as well as trying to get more people and the economy around it, I'm really hopeful that there's writers within the county that feel bold enough to send their scripts into the BBC or to a producer to say, can you have a look at this with an authentic story that's set in Lincolnshire, can be contemporary, but there's a whole lifetime that's happened in Lincolnshire and stories that have not been told that should be. And
totally.
I think this is a really exciting time for the county to really, and that's why we've called this Loud, you know, Location Link's loud. We want to be loud and proud about where we're from. And I think the more we do shout about it, the better.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and be, you know, those writers that might be writing about it, you know, contemporary stories from this region, if it's done in the right way, will be received well. We just, you know, there is so much going on. There is so much to say, and it's not being shown, as we said. So, yeah, representation's key. The stories, you know, writers tell the stories from the region. You know, be brave and bold about the Lincolnshire Wolds. You know, the kind of the region's so different. You know, the Lincolnshire as a county is so diverse. You know, the fact that there is that diversity within the county, and you know, these stories aren't coming through. So yeah, so definitely get writing them, because it will be incredible to see that authenticity on screen, I think.
And audiences only really ever see the finished film. So the process of receiving that story, what would you go through to the point of taking it to buyers with those writers? You know, if you had somebody come with never had any experience before, but has a brilliant idea, what would you say to them, and how would you get that in a position to be able to take to broadcasters
So I
and
think there's
makers?
the two parts to that. The first part is that I think the things that people see on screen that might have been shot here, the few things that have been shot here, are generally depicting something else. You know, so there's that aspect of filming here. But the authentic stories from authentic writers, I would say to them, you know, be specific, you know, be bold, so that there's an authored voice and you've got what do you want to say with it? You know, what's the message? And then, you know, there's lots of different ways to approach writing. If they are a writer already and they have some screen experience, then they will understand screenplay format and the elements of screenwriting, I guess. So I guess it's, yeah, be bold, have something to say, and why do you want to tell it and why now? I think it's easier to sell contemporary stories at the moment. You know, we're being told that nobody wants period. Nobody wants period.
Apart from Margot Robbie's Wuthering Heights.
Yes,
we'll do that though.
But it's because of that specific team around that. So from an unknown writer, I'm trying to get to the heart of what, you know, it's a harder sell for sure, because, you know, the industry's very risk averse at the moment. They want a track record. They want to know what you've done. So if it's a new writer, I would say the things that are breaking through are authored voices that have something to say. So think about what aspect of Lincolnshire you want to show and what do you want to say about it. And how do you want to depict it on screen? You know, it may be that you live in a backwater, as the country sees it, you know, that has a very traditional, old-fashioned kind of approach to life. There's something fascinating about that hasn't been depicted on screen. You know, we might see something from Cornwall that's allowed to do that, but we haven't really seen it from Lincolnshire. So, you know, there's a wealth of stories here, true stories that you could, or you know, indeed, fictional,
and characters
and heritage, and, you know, yeah, a wealth of stories that are waiting to be told from the region. So I'd say just get writing, share them with Heather and I, and yeah.
What excites you most about the first encounter with the script?
The potential for finding a gem, I think.
And there's a lot of not gems,
For sure.
Yeah. But I think you're right when you say, do you know, for me, if I'm like even 3 or 4 pages in and I'm like, gosh, this is already hard work, I'll give it another 5 or 10. I'm going to admit I won't carry on if it's just not working. The best scripts are when you're already halfway through your hand and realise you started.
Yeah, you've got to finish.
Oh my God, what is this? And you know, whoever's written it has really got me, and I haven't even noticed. This is a breeze to read.
Yeah.
You know, 120 pages have suddenly gone, whereas some 90-minute scripts feel like they're 1,000 pages long. Yeah. You know, it's
if you can see if there are a lot of problems with the story or the characters, then yeah, generally, you know, it's good. There's various reasons why something might be heavier lifting, I think, and but yeah, it's always exciting when you can turn the page quickly and you've got to finish it. And it's an easy read, I guess.
Yeah. Do you read for pleasure first?
Not anymore. No, I always read with a producer head
Do
on
you?
if it's something new. Yeah, I try to do a general read first without. I mean, I'm not stopping and making notes. I do a read through first, but I can't help my brain thinking, well, what's that going? You know, how's that going to work?
Yeah.
What does that mean? You know, how much is that going to cost? You know, that kind of thing.
You try not to, but
Yeah.
you're like, oh, that's, you know, that car chase is not going to work for me. Oh, we've blown up a building. Oops.
Yeah.
It's hard to. Do you find now at this point in your career, because this is just me reflecting on you,
Yeah.
that the pleasure I got at the beginning when I didn't know that I need to think about things, of reading a script and enjoying it, just the sheer excitement of bringing it all together has now become, it has become work. You can't help but watch a television show or The Busman's Holiday, I suppose.
Yeah.
So do you still get pleasure from watching film and TV?
Yeah, I do actually. I think I do go through phases like that quite a lot of just going, you know, oh my God, that's going to be really hard work. Oh my gosh, that whatever that character or that's how did they put that together and all that kind of thing. But I think I do, you know, I think just trying to put yourself back as a member of the audience, there's something magical about that. And I do always, as a producer, try to have that as one of the elements that you know, who's the audience for this? It's obviously a major important part of our job. Otherwise we wouldn't be doing our jobs properly. Who's the audience for it, and how are we going to find them? Where is that audience, and who's the right buyer for it? But just from the pure audience joy side of it, it depends. If it's something that I'm really interested in, then I definitely see that still. I think there's so many different angles that we come at it and decide to go with a project, isn't there? I think, you know, it could be that it's a subject matter that maybe you don't know too much about in a way, or an issue that you're passionate about, but you're not engaged with it to some extent, and that could be a route into helping something to impact, to have some kind of social impact. And I think, you know, you feel a responsibility then to get that subject matter out there. There's lots of different routes in isn't it, to just being a passion of yours or whatever. So there's lots of different routes in. But when I'm watching things, I think I definitely connect like that more with independent film than I do with some bigger budget TV stuff, because I mean, it depends where it's shot. I think sometimes if it's shot here, I do think about that, because I think, wow, that's quite, you know, filmic, or that budget would be nice, or whatever. But I do try and enjoy. I mean, there's such a, you know, golden age of TV shows out there that it's nice just to watch as an audience member sometimes. But yeah.
So again, this is off the cuff, but what are you watching now, and what do you always go back to watching?
So I'm a voter member of BAFTA. So for this time of year, I watch loads of stuff because I have to be across all the award contenders. So I tend to be deep in films for that. And at this time of year, they also drop loads of great TV shows. So it's quite frustrating because I'm kind of waiting until all the voting's finished, and then go over and catch up on all the TV stuff. But something that I go back to is Slow Horses. I must say, it's one of my favorites, and I just love watching it. So I like to relax watching that. And I did sneak in the last series and it came out. But yeah, looking forward to the new one.
What is the biggest thing that producing has taught you about yourself? That's a big, deep one.
Yeah, honestly, I think the biggest thing is resilience. You've just got to be resilient. It's so tough out there. It's a tough job anyway. If you're, you know, if you're pitching your own projects, you have to have such belief in the projects that you have in your slate as a producer. You have to have passion for them, and you have to keep believing, because no one else will if you don't. You know, you have to be the absolute champion of those projects. And actually resilience in a really challenging industry landscape, But also, if you're freelancing as a producer, it's really tough. It's long days on set, and you're responsible for a lot of different things, very different people, depending on cast, crew, health and safety, whatever it might be. Resilience is a really important skill.
Do you still enjoy it?
Some days, some days I have to admit, you wonder why you're doing it, for sure, because it's so tough and it's so challenging, and it's a miracle for anything to be produced as an indie today. I think there's so many factors that have to come together at the right time for it to work. It's an incredible, incredibly delicate balance of many, many factors that you are plate spinning all the time. But when the magic does happen, it's an incredible industry to be in at the same time. I've never known an industry that can have so many highs and lows in 1 week.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're nodding, and it's, yeah,
it is. I mean, it's like you have days. I was saying to you earlier that when I got in the car yesterday morning, I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. What's the point? By the time I got to the end of that journey, I was like, this is amazing. This is such a good day. I've just off one phone call, the amount of rejection and it's not for me's, and no, we don't want to give you the money, or actually we'll give you half the money, but that's not enough. You've now got to find another half somewhere.
Decisions that make or break your project.
Yeah. And a lot of it's out of your hands. So it's a hustle every day.
Yeah.
That you get to the moments of like, I want to stop. What am I doing this for? I want to, but then you, like I said, by the time you arrive at the end of the journey, the magic is coming together, and it's there again. So, we won't get on the negative, but I do think resilience, tenacity are very. I'm with you on that.
Really, that would have been my second. Yeah.
And if you could speak to your younger self, this is a good question. It's like, what would you, like at the start of your career, what would you say to Dominique then back in?
I would say just go for it. I would say believe in yourself. You've got nothing to lose. So I would just say go for it and keep going. Yeah.
And then flipping it over, what would you say to emerging producers now, all creatives who don't yet see a clear route into the industry or what their end goal is? What advice would you give right now?
So there's a number of things I think I'd say to younger producers. Now, I think I would say just, surround yourself, go to film festivals, find out what's happening, try and make films with your peers, who's up and coming, can you be on that wave with those writers and directors, and come up together, try and make things together. There are pros in that. I think, they can do it with lower budget equipment. You don't have to have funding behind you. There's very little public funding in this country compared to the rest of Europe, which makes it so much tougher for creatives here and for producers here. So much tougher. Yet, kit wise, they can, they've got flexibility in terms of what they use to shoot on, and just make stuff. So I think that makes things a little bit cheaper. In terms of young producers, I'd say look out for industry training programs that can bring them together with those peer groups. So BFI do a number of kind of emerging producer regional funding, kind of BFI network that are called BFI network, regional funding. Have a look at those emerging producer labs.
That's one thing, not to interrupt you, but I would say that producers are, like you say, generally lone wolves. They're all, that's why it's so nice to hear about you working with Giselle, that I find it really supportive when you go to those schemes that you meet other producers and then they become your peers, and rather than going to the office, if you're in that development period when you're trying to raise money, it is lonely, and you feel like you're the only one fighting. Whereas there are hundreds of other other producers doing exactly the same thing, and find your comrades, because
Absolutely.
we then hold each
Help
other up.
each other.
There's a great bunch of women in our group of people that I've met through Inside Pictures or through BFI or through BAFTA, that you hold each other up. You go, it's not just you. Don't worry, it will come good.
Collaborative group, Producers Anonymous, which is amazing at supporting each other and helping each other.
So if you had a producer that was looking at Lincolnshire and wanting to come to the county, what would you say to them to encourage them to come?
I would say make sure you go and have a look, because there's the most diverse locations that they could use, and it's got everything that they could possibly need, I'm sure, in Lincolnshire to film. And it's really cost effective, and there's great people waiting to help. And
is there anywhere special in your life, or that you know of in Lincolnshire, that you would say would be a brilliant location? And what?
I think there's so many places that are quite iconic, I think, in Lincolnshire, but somewhere that's in Lincolnshire that could be depicted as a variety of places, I think, would have to be in a cornfield with a huge Lincolnshire blue sky around it. That would be my perfect location.
Well, thank you, Dominique Webb, for joining us on Location It's Loud and talking about your connection with Lincolnshire and the film and creative industries in the region.
Pleasure to be here.
This podcast was created by Keel Productions in partnership with the School of Creative Arts at the University of Lincoln and brought to you by our headline sponsor, Associated British Ports. In our next episode, we'll be joined by Adrian Bell, an award-winning sound mixer whose work includes major film productions such as About Time and Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again.